Morning, everyone. So in today's video, we're going to talk about identifying your weakness. I'll go over some of what I think are my main weaknesses that I want to get better at. I have a couple strengths to talk about. Um, and yeah, I think it's good for any player that wants to improve to be able to identify their weakness. And not only that, I think you can identify it, but you also have to get better at it, right? You have to work towards it in some capacity. And I'm not going, this video isn't to go in depth about every weakness and how to improve upon it. I think this is what's going to set up future videos where I'll either do specific things on like, okay, here's one of the things that says my weakness, how can I get better at it, but also going in depth into certain aspects of the game and just how I think about them. So let's just jump into it. That's the best way. All right. So I have some strengths and weaknesses, no fancy things here. We'll go down my list of weaknesses. I'll talk a little bit about, why do I think it's a weakness and whatnot. And one thing I want to preface is I'm experienced enough at the game, and I think I do well enough that this isn't like I don't know how to shoot a basketball, right? It's like, oh, I'm not very good at doing a three-pointer from, I don't know, the top of the key or something. So, you know what I mean? Like, this isn't, it's nuanced stuff, and it's not like I think I'm bad at this. Like, I think I'm still better than the average player, maybe, or like, a midline player. But there's things that I'm like, that's just not as good as I want it to be. And I think this is where I'm having when I'm seeing the most trouble when I'm losing, or even just playing games that are closer than I want them to be. And if you're newer than this, I think you can still take these and maybe expand them to yours, but maybe some of them are too specific for a new player to really focus on, if that makes sense. But we'll go through it. So the first weakness I have that I really feel is looking for group anxiety. And this is not, I'm not anxiety isn't like this a problem. It's more of just, and this has been for a lot of games, even like StarCraft and stuff. I get very, we'll say, nervous before I play a game. And then once the game starts, I'm pretty chill, especially MCP. I've been pretty chill once like the first roll for priority happens. But why I think this is a weakness is there's times where I could play a game or I want to play a game. And I just like, I get to my computer, I'm about to type in looking for group game, and I'm just like, I'm not in the mood. And if I would have just started the game, I would be in the mood. And so I think I miss out on games because of this. Because to be honest, there's like never been a time that I've played and been like super unhappy that I played a game. So I want to, I still get a good amount of games in because of the tournaments, and they're scheduled. I still get nervous in the sense of like I get excited to play, but I don't get like, oh my god, do I want to play here or not? So that's something I want to get better at. I feel like I could squeeze a couple more games in if I just kind of relaxed. And it's not on here, but this kind of goes with caring too much about long shanks. So Longshanks is, there's a record, there's a rating system that is all sorts of flaws as far as like really picking like who's the best. I mean, if you like, I take advantage of it in the case that I play a lot of all my ranked games are basically Johnny's lunch meets, and so even though I do decent in them, I don't win them, but I go like 3-1 most of the time or 2-2. Like I play versus a lot of higher rated people. Or high rated people. And since a lot of your rating is who you play, whether you win or lose, just not playing low rated people keeps my rating high. In fact, I've played games against lower rated people where I win and I lose rating because who you play is such a big factor. And that's why, like, and also like, where do you play? Do you get most of your games online? Do you get them in person? There are some, and this is not to knock anyone who's high rated, there are some people who don't play online. And so they're basically only playing, and they're still playing versus good people, but like it's just not the same. Like if you play it online all the time, you would probably lose a little bit more because there's more good players, more spread of good people to play. And then there's people who just play a ton of ranked games and they have solid ratings, and maybe not the top 10, but it's probably because they just play a ton and they don't give a shit. And so it's hard. I don't. But what I'm trying to say is, I think it's interesting. I like having my win record so I can see it. But I think too much about it, and like that kind of goes with the looking for game anxiety. Even though none of those games are ranked or even on Longshanks, But I probably care too much about stuff that doesn't matter, like losing a game and then it going on your win record, air quotes. Like, who cares? If no one sees the game, I don't care as much. But it's a weird like mental thing. So that's definitely mental. That has nothing to do with even playing. Like, I haven't liked game tracking in any game I've played. It bothers the shit out of me. Internally, like, I just, because you see a loss and it like sticks with you, and lose, the big broad thing is losing is learning. You learn so much, and like a lot of these things, weaknesses, and you don't really spot and fix unless you're losing. But it's great to say you learn a lot from losing, but then if you hate losing, it's good because it helps you learn, but that still doesn't take the sting out, and it really should be much more like, hey, next game. We move on, we learn, especially if it's like a friendly game. Like, who gives a shit, right? All right, so that one's out of the way. These are not in a great order, but we're gonna just go with it. Game planning. So this one, it sounds very broad and sounds like, how do you even get to this level if you can't game plan? I think what I mean by this one is there are situations where you're playing and maybe it's turn top of 2 and it's like 4-4. They have 2 extracts, you have 2. And you kind of got to sit there and say, or even before this, probably, how am I going to win this game? Is it going to be attrition? Is it going to be, I'm going to steal one and sit back? And that's probably where it really starts to mess with me. So I'm going to go in depth about these, but not as in depth as maybe a single video would be. I've played Warhammer, Malifaux, this, and some other games. And so in Warhammer, it's like a 0-20 system, where you can win by more. Like, winning by more actually really matters. And to win by more, you got to go kill their stuff. And I've always been very aggressive of a player. Like, I want to win by the most. And so I do feel like some of that comes from when I was, younger. But when I played Warhammer, I went to a lot of tournaments that paint scores. And so painting was a big part of, your overall score, like a significant amount. Like, if a good painter versus a average painter was like a whole game up. Like, they could go 4-1 and you go 5-0 and you'd lose. So I wasn't a great painter. I'm still not. My MCP is all commission painted, but there's no paint score, so it doesn't matter. I wasn't a good painter, and I didn't care about painting enough. It wasn't like ugly. It wasn't like 3 colors, nothing. But I just speed paint. I don't do a lot of stuff. That being said, to win tournaments, I had to win games big. Like, I had to crush people. And so I'm always of the mindset of like, I'm going to go try to 20 you. I'm going to go try to beat you in the face and try to get max points if I can. And then there's Malifaux, where Malifaux has, the game goes 5 turns. It doesn't just end. But the way you can play Malifaux in a way that you can kind of almost guarantee your win by turn 2 or 3 if you're up by enough. Like, imagine having I'm using a random example. Imagine having a single extract and at the end of turn 2 or something, or end of turn 3, you won at 3-0, and now they can't beat you. And there's other things involved. But in Malifaux, score differential didn't really matter. But I don't know. When it comes to MCP, there are times where, like, what am I trying to say? I think there's 2 things. One is not looking at the game and going, how am I going to win this? Am I going to steal one and kind of hold back? I tend to, like, push for more points, and it puts me in bad situations. Like, I want to get the 7-2 turn, and sometimes it involves putting a model not in a good place, and I should just give the enemy 1 point and try to, like, make them come to me and get the point. And there's times when reflecting where I'm like, why didn't I just sit on my 2 points? It was too, like, the worst case that could happen is we're tying going into the next round. It's not like I'm behind. And then you're like, well, then I threw this model out there and I lost, because you can also wait and go 4-4, 4-4, 4-4. And now you're at 12, 12-12. And then last turn you take a steal, you win 5-3 and 17-15, right? So I need to get better about like that. I feel like I commit aggressively a lot to get more points, and then it backfires. And I look back, I'm like, why did I even try to do that? And it could go the other way too. Like, they're going to be up by 1, and I have to make sure I go at them. I think that happened a lot early on with like webs and understanding how, like, maybe a Hellfire, like the Curtis style, I steal, I sit on points, I don't really do anything not do anything specials. That sounds bad, but I'm not going to go at you. There's a lot of people that are willing to like sit on secures with one extra and just win out by one. It's boring. I don't like it myself, but I understand it's a win condition, and it's not just about like whether I want to do it or not. It's more about identifying when somebody else is going to do it, and then knowing you have to push forward, because sometimes you're like either crowd a point or you kind of stay back because you're nervous about being attacked, and then you're too far back to like catch up at that point. Okay, that's game planning. Play too fast. Exactly what it is. And this has been a lot of these aren't like MCP unique. To be fair, I'd say play fast is where, especially if I'm like I feel like I'm losing, where I just start doing shit. Like I maybe do an activation really like my first activation, I just pick it and do it, and I look back, I'm like, man, I should have done this one first, or this kind of goes with the missed optimal distances where you just do stuff and then you think about it afterwards. You're like, man, why did I play so fast? I should have did this model first. And I don't play with clocks right now just because most things don't have clocks. I guess in the TTS finals we'll have clocks. But there's time, and there's time to self-reflect and be like, what do I want to do this turn? There's only 4 to 5 models to activate. It can't be that hard to think through it. And a lot of it, when you go to the strength side, the reflection, on reflection, it's not easy. It's easy for me to at least be like, oh, I should have did this first after thinking about it. But still, sometimes it's hard to slow the game down in my head, and especially like that first activation. And I really should, take 2 minutes after the turn ends and be like, what do I really want to do this turn? And I do. It's not always like, it's not horrible, but there's some turns where I'm like, I did that too fast. And it's definitely when I get, I don't want to say tilted, because I don't feel like I get super tilted with stuff, but when I feel like I'm behind, I'll do like a very quick and maybe aggressive move, and I'm like, I didn't need to do that. So, that. All right, next one, holding activations. So this comes from Malifaux. So in Malifaux, unlike MCP, if I have 13 models and you have 7, you can't pass. Well, you couldn't pass back in the day. I think you can now. I would just straight up have 6 more activations than you, and so I used to run armies that were like a bunch of little shit and some decent stuff, and I would just do all my little shit and like be annoying, and then they'd have to do their good stuff, and then I'd basically get 3 or 4 activations where it's just my good stuff without any counterplay. That works better in Malifaux at the time because little things could also make your bigger things have to like more annoying. So like example, you could run a small unit, a goblin next to or gremlin next to a big bee, and he can't just walk away freely. He has to potentially kill you, which is fine usually, or he has to make a roll to get away from you, or flip, whatever. And so in MCP, you can't do that. You can't just run Widow next to somebody and be like, haha, you can't shoot out because Widow's standing next to you. Like there's no control zone where, oh, Widow's within one of you, so you can't target somebody with your range 5. It doesn't work like that. And I have this mentality of like, I need to hold this activation. I need to hold this activation. I need to do Voodoo last so I can do this fucking amazing play. And then Voodoo dies. And I'm just like, fuck. He died. And so things like that, where I just like, I hold an activation and I'm just like, I shouldn't have held this one. Like, he could have died. And I'm getting better at this one. But it's hard. It's easier with new Voodoo because he's not as like possess and run as he used to be. But it definitely, I feel it sometimes where I'm like, why did I hold this freaking activation? So yeah, I want to get better about knowing when to hold it or not, and not be like, oh, I'm dead. Next one, missed optimal distances. So this kind of goes with playing fast. And this one, again, it's hard to, I know I do it, but it's hard to, this one's going to be hard to get better at. So, because you have to get really experienced with a list. Like, for example, making sure everybody's within range 3 for heroes for hire, or certain models are in range 3 for heroes to hire, or pre-planning it. People, it's not hard to walk and make sure somebody's out of walk and attack range, even though I am pretty bad about checking that sometimes, and I need to get better about that. It's a lot of these are not like hard things. They're just like some of it's laziness, like checking if someone can walk and attack you, and whether you really need to be in that spot or whether you can afford to be slightly back. And then there's things like I think Convocation playing it has really opened my eyes to some of it, where it's like, okay, making sure I can bump into sacrifice range, or making sure that Wong is already within 3 so he can heal somebody instead of having to walk and heal. Um, or making sure that I can bump into on an objective if I get attacked. Like things where you're like, I'm not in a bad spot. Like it, but like I could be. It's not the obvious optimal distances. Is what I'm saying. It's the ones that are like, oh man, I really would love to bump into a sack range so I can sack the second attack, and then you're like, fuck, I can't do that. And sure, like, on a and B within 3, stuff. It's hard to. There's a lot of little distances, whether it's, like sack ranges, whatever. Like there's little distance where you play the game, and you're like, oh, I could have did this a little better. Maybe it's to get out of the enemy or something. The martial artist thing, right? People talk about like pre-measuring and martial artist and stealth. That's really easy. I get the 3-inch gap like between the two of them. So there's a lot of more very closely nuanced ones, bodyguard, stuff like that, that I just wish I needed. I just need to get better at. And a lot of it comes with being better with, really playing the shit out of a list, so you get used to seeing those, right? I very rarely miss too badly on heroes for higher distances, or knowing that I need Luke to be somewhere. But it took a lot of playing Luke to really kind of ingrain in my mind, okay, I need to be within 3. Am I going to have 2 power or not? So that. The next one is self-imposed list restrictions. So this is maybe a little bit of a scrubby mentality if you want to think about it from like a fighting game perspective, like saying I'm never going to throw people or something. And this isn't really a big weakness, because I don't think I self-impose myself enough to really hinder my chances to win. But I refuse to play CGR, period. Like I will not play that model. And I'm not shy to say that I think he is an easy button, and I think people, I'll say, this is going to sound harsh. I think people are winning with CGR who would otherwise not win. Yeah, I think that's fair to say. I think that CGR gives you a avenue for a mid player to beat a better player, just because of how strong the model is and how kind of easy it is to use. And I refuse to play it. Yeah, that's it. I mean, I've said it before. I'm not. You play what you want. AMG gave us these rules, and you're more than free to play CGR if you want. I can't stop you, and I'm not. I can't even. I'm not even gonna sit here and shout from like it should be banned. I don't. Respect. Respect sounds so bad, right? I don't really admire CGR tournament wins. I'm kind of like meh. I'm not impressed. That's probably the best word. I'm not impressed by it. I can respect your decision to take it, but don't be like I'm gonna fangirl over somebody. Oh my god, how did you do it? Oh, we all know how you did it. You took CGR. Can you do it without it? And so there's very few things that I won't play. Like I won't play Malekith. I won't play CGR. I have put them in lists just to pretend I'm gonna play it, but with zero will ever play it. I don't really love R&D, though I will play it. There's only a few things. Like my perfect, and I play Sam, so don't get me wrong, Sam is really strong, but my perfect team or perfect affiliation is a fairly high skill ceiling but also strong. I really just want to be able to compete with anything. I think the thing I dislike the most is losing. I don't want to ever play in a game that I'm super unfavored in. maybe the very rare, like, oh my god, we pulled the exact 2 scenarios and he had the exact, like, 3 models that sucked versus me. And it almost never happens. But for the general, I don't want to have to be like, oh my gosh, I hope no Kingpin player shows up. So I have a couple self-imposed ones. I refuse to play like new old Steve. I don't really like super janky turn 1 stuff. I much more prefer like reactive, like really in the game, stuff. The whole turns 2 to like 4, really playing and really seeing it come alive instead of like I mathed out a billion things for turn 1 and I hope it works out. The thing is, you can beat a lot of people in turn 1 if you do that. Now, I think sometimes you get to against strong other players who know what you're going to do, and then if you're not strong into turns 2, 3, 4, you just lose anyway. And then the last one, lazy deployment. Again, it's not like I deploy like an idiot. It's just sometimes very lazy. So yes, I know the eyes on the prize person has to go here, and yes, I can identify they're gonna eyes here. I should put something on the other side. But there's times where like I kind of don't know what I want to do with a model, especially like maybe voodoo or something, and maybe I don't put myself across from a point where if I would have, I could have walked and attacked, as opposed to just walking once won't get me the attack. Especially, it's easy when you have Logan and they don't have a safe grab to like put yourself across from one of the midline extracts. I mean, like if you go get it, I know Logan can get there. That's fine. Like it's just sometimes they're lazy. It's not. And maybe if I want to go into lazy deployment, maybe sometimes I'm a little too optimistic in deployment. Where, how am I gonna put this? Like sometimes you just double walk. Like sometimes at the end of the turn, you realize that half your guys, all they did was double walk to a point, like in a B map. And instead of putting my models in the middle and just saying, I'll double walk to where I think I need to go, I'll kind of put them over to the side towards the B I want them to go to initially. And so that one walk gets me to the point. Thinking like if the enemy is dumb enough to like walk across the board, I'll get to attack them. But most people don't attack you or can't. They'll put themselves far enough back you can't. Even if you know what I mean, like, and since they got to stand on the point, it's not like if you set up in a way that you couldn't walk and attack them that they're gonna all of a sudden run across the board. So there's some stuff there where I need to get better at like having the option, because sometimes it's about the option of you in the middle to be able to go to both B's as opposed to being very stuck to one side. So yeah. Those are something. There's probably more, but those are, like I said, they're all. Oh, they're hard to like. So like self-imposed restriction is a weakness that I don't care to improve on. I don't think I've restricted myself enough. I just want to put that there to like knowingly say that I know I refuse to do it. To be honest, a lot of this, half of it, I could sum up in think more. So let's go to strengths real quick. So we'll go over my strengths and I'll kind of talk about the holistic. So situational awareness. How do I put this? And this is why I love models like Logan and anyone with like a move off moves off a thing, just like, or like I like Angela a lot, like from a reflection of from just playing her a couple times. I think I'm good at like looking for plays like in the mid game, not like turn 1 shit whatever. Everyone can look for that, but like seeing like I can push here, attack, get on the other side of him, attack this model. I'm thinking Rhino, for example. I can attack this model, place on the other side. Now I'm within 3 of another model. I'll attack that model, and then when I place there, I'll be within range 2 of this size 4 terrain. And they don't have brace, and then I'll throw it at this model. That's a very extreme example, but that's the kind of general stuff. I think I can see plays decently if I think about them. So, stuff like that. So that's why I like models with places off of attacks. And I think, or like that's why I really like bump as a leadership. Not only do I think it's really good, but I think it makes your opponent think, and it also gives you opportunity to where you get attacked. You're like, ooh, is there a situation? Am I going to get closer? If somebody has a range 4 attack and I have voodoo, I know that if they attack me, and if I can hold the activation and they attack me and do a damage, I get to bump forward, and now I'm in range of them. Stuff like that, where you just kind of look for plays. Reflection, I think just being able to talk about what your weaknesses and strengths are is good reflection. I could even say, yeah, I mean, it's just you got to be able to reflect on games and really think about why you lost. And, I definitely remember my losses way more than my wins. And I think that's good because I think you're not going to, beating some newish or not good player 20-5. What does it matter? What do you learn from it, right? You might learn something because sometimes you can learn like little things about your own team, at least situations, but it doesn't get you anything. So losing or having tight games with good players is really what helps you, and being able to reflect on it. Like if your big reflection is, oh, I rolled bad on this attack, or he spiked this attack, blah blah blah, like you're never going to get better. And there's people like that all the time that want to complain about dice and spikes and whatnot. And I mean, what goes with risk assessment. So I do statistic stuff for my job, and I'm not here to act like I'm the greatest statistician ever, but just having a general sense of like shit can happen. And it's not, I guess you need to have the perspective of one, that dice happen. Sometimes you roll 6 hits on 4 attacks. And the thing I think that maybe gets people is it's not that crazy. Like it's not, you're only rolling a very few amount of dice. Right? If you were rolling 50 dice in one attack, it'd be very close to average a lot of the time. You're rolling like averages are like the bane of people, I feel like, in MCP. Because they look at this average and say he only averages 2, for example. But when you're only rolling like 6 dice, like it's very easy to spike air quote, up or down. Like the graph of possibilities is very kind of close. So if I had to give advice on this one, it would be, and there's teams where I look at a situation, man, I feel like I got spiked there. Like I got one shot. And then you do the math. And you're like, man, that was like 10%. And when you see that, you got to think, is 10% good or bad? If something happens to me and it's like 10 to 15%, I go, oh, that's not as crazy as I thought. Now, if it's like a 3% or a 1%, you can get a little upset and be like, oh, I can't believe I got one shot by Sinister Traps or something like that. But like if something's like 20% of the time, like that's 1 out of 5, guys. That's not crazy to happen. And you have to be able to reflect and say, all right, it sucks this happened, but there's probably a lot of other things you did wrong. And just like general risk assessment type stuff, like knowing the math, knowing when to do stuff. And I think MCP has this interesting risk assessment because it's not just I'm spending an attack, I'm wasting an activation or an action to potentially do damage, and if I don't kill you. But like there's sometimes the worst case scenario, which is where you do a bunch of damage, except for maybe they live on 1, and all of a sudden you gave them the ability and power to do a lot more powerful things. And so it really is because of the rubber banding effect of power and MCP. You really have to think like, am I willing to risk, doing 3 of 4 damage and giving them 3 power? And that's why maybe one of my weaknesses is I much prefer, I try to do like guaranteed, air quote guaranteed, or very high probability, like dazing people, like straight up 0 to 100% to 0 to 100%, killing them. And I think chipping people, in this game, I think chipping people out has a lot of flexibility, because sometimes you kill somebody and you're like, what would they have really done that turn, right? Would they have really, like, sometimes you kill somebody, and if you kill them before they activate, great. But if you kill them before they activate and they wouldn't have done much, then maybe you're better off leaving them on like 1, or throwing them off a point so they have to walk back, and then killing them the next turn. With a swing turn, for example. Just something to think about. And that'll be more of a video thing. Rules knowledge. I'm pretty good at rules knowledge. In other games, I've been very good at the rules. I think this is an important strength for anybody. I'm not perfect at it because the timing charts still kind of mess me up. But knowing the timing chart, knowing how throws and stuff work. And this is... So I do want to actually talk about this for a second. And I know cards fairly well. I don't know every card, but I tend to look at them. I know a general sense of what things can do to at least be like, oh, I don't think it works that way. Knowing the power cost. And I think that's important. I think, it's not... So I want to say this. I don't know rules to screw people. I know rules so I don't get screwed. And what I mean by that is, I'll use this example. And I don't know if the people I talk to are listening, but I kind of like a question I've asked people is, if somebody dark rained your Medusa, so you can't reroll against Medusa. If somebody dark rained your Medusa, would you tell them when they were about to do it, hey, dark rain doesn't work on her. She doesn't know how rerolls. Right? Pretty interesting example. There's people on the spectrum of it. There's people that will really, there's two sides. You either will tell them or you won't. I would tell somebody. I would tell them, hey, it doesn't work, Med. And there's people who I like and talk to who say they will not tell them. And I can and I think it's a different mentality, and I think both are perfectly fine. Listen, I don't let people go back all the time. Personally. There's little things where, like, honestly, if you miss your small window for a KO timing X23 thing, I would probably let you do it. Honestly. If you want to, like... I'm trying to use examples. If you want to Bucky got your back after I already did another attack, then I'm not going to let you do it. And the way I want to put this is, I won't help you with like super advice, right? I'm not going to give you a bunch of tactical opinions. But I don't want to lose or win because somebody forgot something or didn't realize something that was kind of obvious if you just like read a card. You know what I mean? So that's why the Dark Rain example sticks out to me, because I'm like, that's like winning because somebody like played Dark Rain and didn't realize that it didn't work on Medusa doesn't like, I don't want to win. I don't want to win like that personally. And listen, I've had wins where the opponent made a mistake on their last turn, like they activated in the wrong order or something, and I legit feel like bad. Not for them, but I'm like, I shouldn't have won that game. It doesn't feel good to me to win sometimes by maybe something that is more obvious to me or something. I don't like that. Now it makes me learn, it makes me reflect, what could I have done better? But that doesn't sit well with me. It doesn't sit well, that Dark Rain example. Like, I feel like I'd have a lot of trouble doing it to somebody. Yeah, I think I'd tell somebody that. Now, listen, there are things that, like, I'll give you an example. You attack somebody and you get to place with... here's an example where I wouldn't tell somebody. Logan's a bad example. Someone with range, somebody moves next to Bill or Voodoo and attacks him with a range 2. And he has the move. If he bases the bases Voodoo can't get out of range 3 with a bump because 1 plus 2 is 3, same as range 2. If he leaves me any room, I can bump and get out of range of the second attack. So if he misses it by a quarter inch, and he could have gotten base to base to make sure I couldn't, and this is, let's say, a charging model, for example. I was wondering how they get 2 attacks. I wouldn't like tell them they messed up. Like, I wouldn't be like, hey, if you're base to base, I won't be able to get out with the bump, because it's too far gone in the process, and it's tactical at that point. I don't feel like winning by the dark rain thing is tactical. I don't like it. Anyway, know your rules though, because you don't want to be caught in that situation. And sometimes I mess the ordering things up. I'm not perfect at rule knowledge, but generally speaking, I'll probably be one of the better rules people in a game. I was better in 9th Age. I was like one of the better rule people, for sure. And that had a lot of rules, so this game isn't too bad. But knowing the cards and stuff, I'm pretty good about it. I need to get better with some of the weird stuff, but it comes with playing. Anyway, now you know some of what I think are my weaknesses and one of the things I want to work on. And then, videos from here will be on specific topics. We're just going to go from here, guys. Thanks for listening.